Libya, Friday, June 28, 1996. Muammar Gaddafi, guide of the Libyan revolution, awakens in the luxurious bedroom of one of his numerous villas. It is 8 a.m. and like every morning, Gaddafi has a hard time getting up. As opposed to Stalin's austere life, he is totally dominated by his impulses and suffers from numerous addictions, mind-altering drugs, alcohol and sex. But at 54, his body is wearing down, having been subjected to every kind of excess for far too long. As a result, it is increasingly difficult for him to maintain his self-control in public. People are frequently perplexed by his erratic behavior. Mitterrand judged him unstable. Ronald Reagan referred to him as a mad dog, and to Anwar al-Sadat, he was just plain crazy. Nevertheless, it is this sex maniac and drug addict who rules Libya with an iron fist. For 27 years, he's been systematically plundering his country's wealth, beginning by confiscating the colossal oil and gas revenues, and then appropriating all big business concerns and redistributing them to his entourage. Today, although he is one of the richest men in the world, his home is half buried underground, surrounded by bulletproof walls and watchtowers, with soldiers standing guard 24 hours a day. Not only is part of this residence underground, but it is also hidden inside the perimeter of an ultra-secure compound, Bab al-Azizia, which covers 6 square kilometers. An entire city within a city, located in the heart of Tripoli, a huge area surrounded by walls, a veritable modern fortress. Mohammed Gliwan, Gaddafi's personal cameraman, is part of the dictator's innermost circle.
داخل باب العزيز داخل سياج كان في سياج داخل سياج يعني كانت في بوابة تمنع أي حد يمشي إلا المطلوب اللي بدها اللي قريبة من العائلة مثلا أنا مصور دكتور طباخ كانوا أشخاص معينين يدخلوا للدائرة اللي موجود فيها بيتها يعني بيتها أصلا بيت عائلته يعني.
And even within this fortress, the exact location of Gaddafi's home is kept a secret.
تخيل هم داخل باب العزية وداخل المعسكر ولكن مش كل شخص يعرف بيت القذافي وين. فكان القذافي سر غامض لأنه هو كان لا يثق في أحد وليس هو عبقري هو كان يخاف.
Fear became an obsession with Gaddafi after the Americans bombed his palace in 1986. Suspected of funding many terrorist attacks around the world that resulted in hundreds of victims, he became public enemy #1. Since then, he has lived constantly on the alert, like a fugitive inside his own country. But now, in 1996, Gaddafi is threatened by a new enemy, the National Front for the Liberation of Libya, comprised of armed Islamist groups that are based in the desert and have declared war on him. Gaddafi takes this threat very seriously. They are Salafists, suspected of being linked with Al-Qaeda. He has already had hundreds of them arrested and imprisoned in Abu Salim prison. Living conditions there are horrendous. Fatih Saad was imprisoned there during that time. For 12 years, he witnessed what the prisoners had to undergo.
النوع المادي يعاملك يعذبك عذاب بالضرب بالكهرباء بالتعليق اليدين في أعلى وتقعد يوم كامل معلق بين يديك من أعلى تعذيب إن تنام على البلاط بدون زليز احنا نقول البلاط وبعد ذلك يصب عليك مية سخونة في أثناء الليل. هذا المادي. شعوري بالإحباط. عارف أنت اللي يقبض عليه أنا متأكد إن اللي يقبض عليه القذافي ينتهي.
Conditions inside were really brutal. The jail cells were overcrowded. The people who died were often left in the cells for days. And torture was institutional. People felt like there was no way out, that they were buried alive in this prison. They felt like they were in a prison where the keys had been thrown away.
This Friday, June 28th, the prisoners can't take any more. They have reached their limit. For days, dead bodies have been left to rot inside their cells. They have nothing to lose. Today, Gaddafi will soon have to deal with a completely unprecedented situation. In 27 years of absolute power, he has never had to face the kind of massive revolt that is about to break out at Abu Salim. This date will never be forgotten in the bloody history of Libya under Gaddafi's rule. It's 11 a.m. in Bab al-Azizia. Gaddafi is in his bathroom preparing to start the day. Several young women are in attendance, taking care of his every need. They take his blood pressure daily, they massage him, apply makeup, and dye his hair to cover the bald spots. But at 54, Gaddafi can't abide the premature aging of his face, marked by excesses of every sort, and which bears no resemblance to the young man who took power 25 years ago. At that time, the international press had referred to him as the Arab Kennedy. And his good looks had played an essential part in his popularity and success. But he can't count on his seductive charms any longer. A few weeks ago, he underwent plastic surgery for the first time. It took place in the middle of the night in a high-security clinic built in a bunker underneath his house. The surgeon was Brazilian, not one Libyan was present, and Gaddafi refused a general anesthesia in order to remain conscious during the operation.
Dentro do palácio eu não vi nenhum líbio, tudo estrangeiro. A maioria de origem eslava, russo, iugoslavo, que não existia a antiga Iugoslávia, paquistaneses, indianos. Líbio mesmo, dentro do bunker eu não conheci nenhum. Né? Quem matou Indira Gandhi foi um indiano. Quem matou Saddam foi um egípcio. E ele tinha medo de que um líbio o matasse. É um dos motivos que não tinha líbio dentro do bunker. Então eu acho que ele não quis anestesia geral também.
All his life, Gaddafi would continue to have plastic surgery performed without a general anesthesia. Obsessed with his image, Gaddafi is constantly reinventing himself according to the political role he wishes to play. Soldier of the revolution, patron of international terrorism, self-proclaimed leader of the Arab countries, and even African king of kings. There is no limit to his arrogance and megalomania.
يعني مشاكس يبي يطلع قدام العالم بأي طريقة. هو يلبس خالف تعرف، مش عارف متى هذا يعرفوه ولا. هو لما يلبس أشياء غريبة الناس تهتم له، الصحافة تهتم له. بس يعني رفع رفع باليوغوسلافيا. أنت من تعرف طائرة يوشن ترفع إبل لمجرد الشو، بس لمجرد انه باش يهتموا به الاعلام ويصوروا. هو كان شخص يشعر بالنقص. انا نلاحظ ان هذا الرجل ما يبيش حد افضل منه. ربما الفقر اللي عاشوا فيه كان سبب له عقد نفسيه وكبرت معاه. هذا الرجل عاش مرحله في عمره كانت متعبة جدا، فاضطر أنه ينتقم من هذا الشعب. وأنا نشوف فيه ينتقم يوميا.
Gaddafi came from a Bedouin family. They lived in a tent in a desert area near the town of Sirte, a region considered almost uninhabitable where young Muammar tended the goats. His father worked as a servant for a powerful family. They were considered second-class Libyans. Gaddafi would never forget that. His cousin, Said Gaddafi el-Dam, shared the misery of his childhood.
Well, tribe, those days, respect the strong and the rich. He was not strong and not rich, and he had a tough, hard life in the beginning. I think this is one of the reasons he makes against the people after. The whole society. It's deep inside. It's his personality.
When he was only 10, Gaddafi decided to escape the poverty in his family's life and go to school in the city. He climbed on a truck and arrived in Sirte. Alone and destitute, he slept outside and survived on dates. When he returned to his village a few years later, he returned as a hero. He had become Colonel Gaddafi, the man who had just led the revolution and freed his people from the monarchy of old King Idris, who had reigned for 52 years. From the start, Gaddafi knew how to play up that childhood scenario to his advantage, arranging interviews with his family for Libyan television programs, later to be picked up by foreign networks, where he played the humble man who owes everything to his strong character and to his courage.
Enfant, j'étais berger et j'emmenais paître les troupeaux de moutons et de brebis. Je me souviens de la pauvreté dans laquelle se trouvait toute la région.
Moi et son oncle, nous étions bergers. J'ai délaissé les études pour devenir berger. Tout le monde poussait Muammar à arrêter ses études et à venir aider sa famille qui vivait dans la misère. Il a refusé et a continué à étudier.
"25 years later, Gaddafi and his family controlled all the refineries and were at the head of all the biggest companies in the country. Only after his death would his people learn that the humble Bedouin and his children had lived in utter luxury. At the end of his life, his personal fortune was estimated at $144 billion. The little desert shepherd had become one of the richest men in the world. Like Stalin, every day Gaddafi signs the lists of people who are sentenced to prison or to death. He tolerates no argument. He used to say, "All those who oppose the regime, and especially the Islamists, must be treated like cockroaches and deserve to be eradicated without trial."
كان يجيبوا لها هو في بريد ورقة مكتوبة فيكتبوا لها فيها مثلا علي الكيلاني مثلا إقامة جبرية في البيت فهو حسب المزاج يعني هذا بيقول يروح هذا بيقول يبقى هذا يعني كان قاضي وضابط شرطة ورئيس دولة وكل شيء كان.
From the moment he took power, he put in place a brutally repressive regime. But it was in 1984, after barely escaping an attempted assassination, that he decided to televise the trials and public executions so as to terrify the entire population. The first of these trials was that of this young student being judged before an enraged crowd and whose only crime was to have studied abroad.
انضميت كنت ندرس في أمريكا. الشعب
A mock tribunal accuses him of having made contact with figures of the opposition in the United States, and even to have trained in Morocco to prepare an assassination attempt on Gaddafi. Hoping to save his life, the student confesses to everything, but as in all corrupt trials, the result is a foregone conclusion.
It's an event that shocked every Libyan, because I think it's at that moment that they understood just how far the Gaddafi regime was willing to go to instill terror into their own people.
The entire population felt threatened, even people at the highest level.
وبالتالي من يخالف رأي معمر القذافي سيتعرض لأقول الإهانة، للسجن، للتعذيب وحتى القتل.
And yet, Gaddafi had been a young revolutionary who rose to power at the age of 27 as the defender of great causes. To unify the Arab countries, to free Libya from foreign occupation by nationalizing the oil companies, to restore independence and pride to his country. The Libyans saw him as the great liberator, another Nasser. Like Stalin and Amin Dada, building national pride and achieving greater social justice were the two main themes that served to consolidate his power.
الجميع، وأنا يعني متأكد من هذا الكلام، شباب، شيب، نساء، رجال، صاروا وراء معمر القذافي. جاءنا بمثاليات السعادة، الخير، الهناء، حب الآخرين إلى آخره، وبدأ يبث في أفكاره. كانت أفكار مثالية. إذن الجميع سار وراء معمر القذافي.
But the honeymoon with his people is soon over. Now he is afraid of his people. He can't even stand being touched by them. And when he is obliged to mingle with the crowds, while pretending to enjoy it, he hits his bodyguards if they let anyone come too close.
يضرب حتى في الحارس بتاعه بالقرعة. حولك يا كلب، حولك يا كلب.
لما يمسكوا يده كان يخاف انه يغتالوه او كانوا يمسكوه، فكان بيضرب الحارس على اساس انه يبعدوا هؤلاء الناس، يعني كل ما ضغطوا الناس وصلوا ليه كل ما كان يضرب.
Gaddafi has lost all contact with his people. Now he only communicates with them on television. Today, as he does several times each week, he is getting ready to record one of his interminable speeches, which has most Libyans yawning. But at last, when he is about to begin, his secretary interrupts him with the news that a revolt has just broken out at Abu Salim prison. Gaddafi doesn't take the alert seriously. Abu Salim is an ultra-high security prison, and he is confident that his powerful police force can put down the rebellion. But what is happening in the prison is far worse than he thinks.
هو كانت في يوم الجمعة باهي الساعة 1 ظهرا، عندما كانوا يوزعون في الطعام. العنبر الرابع كان فيه موتى داخل في السجن، وكانوا في الموتى في داخل الحجرات مخلينهم تعذيبا لجماع السجناء. كان حتى صنتهم ورائحتهم كريهة وكلها. فعندما فتح عليهم الباب خرجوا من الباب وشدوا السجان وأخذوا منه المفتاح وضربوه على رأسه.
Gaddafi has no idea that, at this very instant, what is happening in the prison will cause endless repercussions until the day he dies. Just 3 hours after it began, the Abu Salim prison revolt has exploded out of control, but Gaddafi still hasn't realized how grave the situation is. He returns to his room where one of his victims awaits him. These women come from all levels of society. They are taken from their families and brought before the supreme guide without anyone daring to protest. They are abused, made to endure the worst humiliations, and often beaten. In 1983, Gaddafi created a military academy reserved for women whom he called his Amazons. They were supposed to represent one aspect of modern Libya, the guide's liberation of women. They are his personal guard and surround him during all his public appearances. In fact, these Amazons constitute a gigantic harem of more than 400 young women at the dictator's disposal. But that is not enough for him.
ولا هذه خشت فقط يضرب بإيده يحط إيده على كتفها الحين يحط إيده على كتفها خلاص وين هو في من يلهب الموضوع هذا ويجيبها
اللي معاه فلمجرد انها بيلمس واحدة من البنات هو الحارسة هذه بتمشي تتكلم معاها وتاخذ رقم تليفونها فكان بيتم جلبها عن طريق والله كلهم الأغلبية بنات هم كل البنات اللي تم جلبهم للباب العزيزية كان بأمره هو كان بأنه هو حط يد عليهم وشافهم في موقف آخر طالبة في الجامعة عائلة من داخل عائلة كان الاختيار هيك يكون.
A problem for Gaddafi arose when a girl became pregnant. To discreetly solve this, he had a clinic built in the basement of the university where abortions could be performed.
العيادة وبيت متكامل بالعديد من الحجرات بالحمام بالمطبخ وغيره إلى جانب عيادة قريبة منا جدا. يعني لاحظوا نحن نمر على هذا المكان يوميا طيلة السنة الجامعية ولم نلاحظ شيء. فحقيقة يعني كان أمر غريب. جامعة بقدسيتها كلية القانون بمكانتها بقدسيتها نجد بجانبها للأسف الشديد بيت للدعارة وعيادة نسائية متكاملة بجانب كلية القانون.
In this way, hundreds of women were raped by Gaddafi, by his sons, and even by his men. Inside the concealed camp underneath his fortified villa, Gaddafi has had a nuclear bomb shelter constructed along with a network of 40 kilometers of tunnels, all buried 6 meters below the surface. A veritable underground city with bedrooms, salons, sports facilities, a clinic, and a television studio. Television is his principal tool of propaganda, and he supervises all the programs himself. While he is viewing one of his speeches, taped a few hours earlier, his brother-in-law, Abdullah Sanusi, chief of intelligence, arrives to announce the bad news. More than 1,000 prisoners have ransacked Abu Salim prison. Using sledgehammers, they've forced open the cells in buildings 3 and 4. They're on the verge of escaping, and the guards can no longer contain them. Abu Salim consists of 4 buildings. Fatih Saad, a prisoner in Building 1, where the doors remained closed, describes what happened.
قطعة واحد وقطعة اثنين ما فتحوش عليهم قعدوا وبعد ذلك بدأ التفاوض. جي عبد الله السنوسي وجوا الناس بدوا يشاوروا فيهم ما استجابوش. فبعد ذلك جاء أمر من الأوامر من القذافي نفسه تفصيليا قال على أساس الجماعة 1 و2 طلعوهم لسجن آخر.
Gaddafi orders that the prisoners who did not escape be evacuated and orders Sanusi to hold off the rioters. The evacuation would take all night. Gaddafi awaits confirmation that buildings 1 and 2 have been evacuated. Sanusi, chief of intelligence, phones him. The evacuation has been completed. All the prisoners that have rioted in buildings 3 and 4 are now massed in the courtyard. They are enraged. The situation is explosive. There's no time to lose. Gaddafi orders the execution of the 1,270 prisoners. It is 8:30. Positioned on top of the prison roofs, the soldiers begin firing at the trapped prisoners.
Suddenly, a military force arrived and literally started shooting into the prison, killing over 1,200 prisoners in a massacre that took hours. This was not something that was just over in a few minutes. They kept shooting and shooting and shooting till just about everybody in these 2 wards were dead. Ultimately, Gaddafi's own demise is very much linked to that decision to commit a massacre at Abu Salim, because that is the spark which set off the revolution in 2011.
In fact, in February 2011, at the height of the Arab Spring, the mothers, sisters, and widows of the men killed at Abu Salim take to the streets, demanding to know the exact truth about the circumstances of the massacre. The police intervene and fire at the crowd, which unleashes the first violent confrontations and the beginning of a revolution throughout Libya that would rage for 9 months, and would end with the lynching of Gaddafi by his own people. Years earlier, in one of his texts, Gaddafi had written, "How I love the freedom of crowds, their enthusiastic spirit after their chains are cast off, when they burst out with a cry of joy and sing, instead of wailing in sorrow. But how I fear and mistrust them, and how cruel they are when they are angry. They plotted against Hannibal and made him drink poison. They burned Savonarola at the stake, sent Danton to the guillotine, fractured Robespierre's jaw, dragged Mussolini's body through the streets, spit in Richard Nixon's face." He dies at the age of 69 after having reigned over Libya for 42 years.